So we are halfway through the pandemic. That's what we believe. How have you done so far? What is your strategy for the second half? If it isn't different than last year, then what's going to happen is you're going to end up 2 to 3 times further in the same direction. Did you know that last year we helped over 100 people finish the year with more energy than when the year began? And what I want to do right now is take a look at just a handful of testimonials. So I'm going to share my screen. So if you notice, there's one from a salesman, a college student, a marketing manager, and an educator. So while our course, Instant Impact, was designed to provide mental wellness for educators, we have found it is helping people from all walks of life. These testimonials come from a wide range of ages and professionals. And what I want to do right now is I want to read that last testimonial from the educator, because it involves an educator who isn't from your school district. Here's what she says. Flowcess has given me the knowledge to reprogram my brain and feel empowered and completely at ease with myself, both professionally and personally. My leadership role in a large middle school has significantly changed over the course of the pandemic, and while I can sense tension and stress from colleagues and pupils alike, I've been able to adapt with ease and support those around me while remaining full of energy. As strange as it sounds, 2020 has been a year of personal happiness and growth. Thank you, Flowcess. And to you, I say thank you to you, and educator. Her journey was amazing. It began when she took Instant Impact and the end of July. She was able to sleep through the night for the first time in 5 months. Incredible. Dealing with an administrator in her school was the hardest part about her job. She learned how to unconsciously confront that administrator. And in late November, this administrator singled her out as the only person having energy and not struggling with the pandemic. Woohoo! At the end of the calendar year, the administrator affirmed her for her leadership, discipline, and how she goes above and beyond for the students. She stated 2 years ago, prior to this, she needed a union rep to be present whenever she met with him. So this is an incredible testimonial from an educator, but we want to talk about one more, and I'm going to turn it over to John for that.
We got testimonials from Kakana. Don't get us wrong here, but we didn't want to include any of them here. So I appreciate all the wonderful testimonials from Kakana. So last year, a psychologist took Instant Impact. Now she's been practicing for 11 years, and she tried the course because she was concerned she hadn't really helped anyone, even though everyone tried to convince her she had helped people. It didn't take long for her to realize her issue. See, people dig themselves a hole. People actually put themselves in a hole. And she helped people out of the hole. However, everyone that she helped eventually fell back into another hole, which she would then help them out of again. And she said she felt like a drug pusher, just helping them enough to be able to help them later. So when two people are in a hole, they have something in common. They can bond over being in a hole. And they have a measure for it. Each time they meet each week, they can talk about, are you more or less in the hole this week? What happens when the two people get out of the hole? What do they have in common now? What are they bonding over? What are they measuring? Nothing. And people start feeling so uncomfortable being out of the hole, they jump back in the hole. And that's what the psychologist realized. Her patients were jumping back in the hole because it was more comfortable to be in the hole than to be running around outside the hole. So not only did we help show her how to keep these people out of the hole, but she learned how to help people be happy, and she explained to us the keys we were using to do this. So first she recognized to us, and she said to us, psychology doesn't have a model for the mind and the brain. Now think about it. Would you pay a mechanic who didn't know how a car worked to fix your car? And I'm not talking about an exhaustive model. For example, all of chemistry is based on Bohr's model for the atom. What is that? It's basically the nucleus of the atom is made up of protons and neutrons, accounts for 99% of the weight, and electrons orbit it. What's the model for the mind and the brain? She loved our model based on 25 years of research. What's our model? We call it the driver and car model. You are a driver in a car, you are the mind, and your brain is the car. Now, what does that mean? Well, just like in a car, the driver is only in charge of 10% of that car directly. The steering wheel, the gas pedal, the brake, the windshield wipers, et cetera. In the same way, you are only in direct control of 10% of your brain. That's called the conscious brain. In the car, all of the behavior and all of the energy is in the 90% of the car. Likewise, all of your behavior and all of your energy is in the 90% of your brain. That's called the unconscious brain. You are supposed to use your conscious brain to lead your unconscious. That's the key to all of this. Second, she saw that everything is behavior. What bugs everybody is either your own behavior or the behavior of other people. And she saw that how people try to change behavior proves how they view people. If you intimidate people, you see them as an inanimate object. If you offer reward or punishment, you see them as an animal. If you are logical with them, you're seeing them as a robot. If you appeal to their uniqueness, you're seeing them as a human. So ideally, the uniqueness of the human ought to use the conscious brain to guide the unconscious. That's like using the steering wheel and gas to guide the engine out of a parking lot. She said psychology is focused on using the conscious brain as the engine, like ripping the steering wheel out, taping a gas pedal to your foot, and walking out of the parking lot. Yes, you can make progress in the short term that way, but you wouldn't be able to drive across country in that same way. In fact, this approach is what puts people back into the hole. Her biggest epiphany was how psychology deals with the 10% while we are dealing with the 90%. Psychology deals with the conscious and subconscious. Your subconscious is in your conscious brain. It holds the information you can access, just not directly. For example, what was the name of your first pet? That information is in your subconscious. Behavior is in your unconscious and your conscience is in your unconscious. There's a great video of two capuchin monkeys that demonstrates this. They're two monkeys side by side. They're given a simple task and they're rewarded with a cucumber, and they eat the cucumber 25 times in a row. However, when one of the monkeys is given a grape, when the other monkey gets a cucumber, he takes it and throws it at the technician, rattles the cage, bangs on the ground. That monkey is your unconscious brain. Your unconscious is reflexive and it acts according to fairness. Whatever you do to others, your unconscious brain does to you through energy. We're humans, it's about energy. This is how people dig themselves into a hole and they don't even recognize it. The most humane way to change behavior is unconscious confrontation. And Jonathan and I did a webinar for Kakana showing all the ways to unconsciously confront people. We shared that webinar with the psychologist, and she said, "This is the best thing I have ever seen in my life." So to a psychologist that's all focused on 10%, to have this world open up that there's 90% of the brain, she said it was the best thing she'd ever seen in her life. You choosing to take this presentation today to attend this was a really good choice because you told your unconscious brain you want to be happy. That's great. So after this presentation, if you meet people who didn't choose this presentation, don't be surprised if they're grumpy because their unconscious brain is saying, I guess you don't want to be happy. Don't be surprised if they're throwing cucumbers. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to go back to the slide. Here's the main point that I want you to understand. Wanting a positive experience is a negative experience, and accepting a negative experience is a positive experience. I could have given you a ton of quotes. I like this one. It was the most poetic. This is saying what we're saying about the unconscious brain. When you try to go forward and you try to get the thing you want, you actually are opposed in it. And all the breakthroughs go in the opposite direction. Everybody knows this, and everybody tells stories like this all the time to other people for advice, and then they do the opposite. The smartest characters in every one of these favorite stories that we like talks and acts exactly like this quote.
When people are in a hole, the first step is to get them out of a hole. So when we talk about in the hole, what do we mean in the hole? In the hole means you are overwhelmed. You're anxious, you're frustrated, you're unsettled, you have this feeling of impending doom. These are unconscious feelings you can't get your finger on and say, this is the direct issue. So what we're always talking about is we're always talking about that 90%, your unconscious brain. The key to remember is that we're not robots. And if I treat someone like a robot, they're going to remain overwhelmed and continue to dig themselves in the hole, just like that little guy right there. If the advice is to focus on logic, I'm going to put that human further in the hole in the long term. So the focus needs to be on energy. Talking about energy is in your unconscious brain, in the 90% of your brain. So what I want to do right now is I want to give you 10 applications, Jonathan's top 10 applications for getting someone out of a hole. And it starts with number one, knowing your uniqueness. I don't know if you can believe this, but there are people who don't like John and myself. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. There are people that don't like us. However, when we help them unlock their uniqueness, they will share their uniqueness with everyone, regardless of how they feel about John and I. This is so powerful. This is such powerful, powerful information. So knowing your uniqueness, the truth is that logical advice that directly applies to everyone is for robots. The proof is if I give you all of the reasons to exercise and eat right, you're going to eat right, right? That's it. That's all you need. No, we're not robots. We're humans. 50% of the world are what we call server hows. Okay? It's one of the intangible drivers. They get energy helping other people, and it actually drains them when they're the one being helped. John had we were working with a whole group of administrators. John said, hey, does anyone want coaching? I love coaching. Please reach out to me if you want coaching, and none of them did. None of them said that until he finally said, you know what? You would be doing me a favor if you reached out for coaching. And then all of those administrators did. Number two, avoid statements and judging. If a teacher gets frustrated with a student's inability to focus for 5 minutes and that teacher can't focus for 5 minutes, then when that teacher says to that student, you need to learn to focus, their own unconscious brain, like John said, is reflexive, like a reflex. It's going to push back on that teacher and say, oh, you do that exact same thing, and it's going to drain that other person. An example of this is at the high school, in your high school, and I think you are familiar with this. Hi. This. This is called the ghost approach. So these are communication guidelines. When John and I taught these communication guidelines, asking questions, answering questions, sharing on yourself at an alternative EBD middle school, the kids could not fight anymore. So following these guidelines is an incredible way to stay out of a hole, and it can help other people from falling into the hole. So when someone makes a statement on you, you do this, you do that. If we respond with one of these guidelines, it's going to keep us from going out of a hole. So specifically, answering questions. If someone's asking a series of seemingly rhetorical questions in a presentation, what's really helpful is to write down a yes or a no, or to mumble to yourself the answer to the question, and that's going to keep you from being out of a hole. Okay. Number 3, self-talk. Self-talk, according to the communication guidelines, are going to help you. However, self-talk in opposition of the communication guidelines puts people in a hole. If I say, I am a great educator, that is bragging. Bragging is not one of the communication guidelines. I want to be a great educator is. That is called sharing on yourself. I want to be a great educator is a goal. So anytime people are using this self-talk, John and I will take a step back and go, ooh, is that according to the communication guidelines or not according to the communication guidelines? Number 4, one thought mindfulness. People like to ask us, is mindfulness beneficial? Does that help people? And we say yes, if it focuses on helping you get to one thought. There's zero thought mindfulness where people like empty your brain, have no thoughts. That doesn't help anyone. As they progress in those zero thought mindfulness courses towards one thought, where they start to have one goal or start to think about their breathing, and they have that one thought, that will actually help them. But zero thought mindfulness doesn't work and puts people in a hole. Number 5, rehearse your triggers away. People say, oh, I have these buttons that when someone presses, I go from 0 to 100% energy and I fight, I flight, or I freeze. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking about triggers. These are something that we believe we can rehearse away. We teach about how that part of your brain works. It's called your amygdala, but we help you rehearse those triggers away. And that is really the definition of falling in the hole. People trigger, they go fight, flight, or freeze, and they spend months or years trying to fix something that they caused in seconds. Number 6, identify your 5 influencers. Humans physiologically sync to others that are present. Think about a sports team and momentum. Crowds will sync up together. It's a real thing. Well, that's something that is physiological. You are the average of the 5 people you interact with the most. So what we do is we have an exercise. We say, rank the 5 people that you spend the most time with and rank their thought process 1 to 5 from best to worst. Now what I want you to do is I want you to circle that 3rd person on your list. Do you want to have that person's thought process? Number 7, help your influencers. If you help those people improve their thought process, it improves yours. Otherwise, try to hang around people with a better thought process. That's something that we can do. We can help people's thought process around us. Number 8, admit you're wrong. When you do something that's wrong, we're not saying I'm sorry. We're not saying for you to say, my bad. We're not saying for you to say, I apologize. We're saying, admit you're wrong. I was wrong. How do you feel about others who admit that when they're wrong? Good. What do you think people will think about you when you admit you're wrong? Ooh, why is there a disconnect there? It's because we're humans and not robots. We are putting ourselves in a hole when we try to not admit we're wrong. Number 9, affirming others. When someone affirms us, it can energize us for 48 hours. However, when we affirm others, we can be energized for longer. I am in control of my ability to affirm other people. I call it being an affirmation sniper. I'm looking for opportunities to affirm other people around me, and that energizes me. It's something I'm in control of. This leads to my last point. Number 10, loving versus taking. Giving without expecting anything in return causes my unconscious brain to give me pleasure chemicals, regardless of my circumstances. And I will give it over to John.
So Jonathan showed you how to get out of the hole, how to stop yourself from putting yourself, how to get out of the hole in a sense, because it's our unconscious. So the question now is, what did we do to help these people be happy and stay out of the hole? Well, I realize the slide's kind of busy, so I'm just going to try to point out the key things to look at. This slide represents the 4 thought processes in the brain. There's only 4. Everything you do comes from one of these 4 thought processes. This right here, 320, this is your triggering. This is fight, flight, or freeze. Jonathan talked about the amygdala right there. 160 is when people aren't focused. This is the addictive thought process. And 80 is when people are focused, they're resilient. 94% of people are at 160. 94% of people are just running around, walking around automatic. Resiliency is the ability to get yourself up to this focused thought process and remain there despite your surroundings trying to distract you and take you down. Nothing about people with addictions. They work hard to effort themselves up this sheer face. This is like a cliff face, this sheer face, only to fall back down once they lose focus. This is what the psychologist saw with her patients. The psychologist said, and this blew me away, and I never thought about it this way, but this has totally changed my life on how I look at this. She said, once the person is out of the hole, this is when the real help happens. We have this all wrong. We think the real help is getting people resilient, but all we're doing is setting them up to fall back in a hole. When we get them resilient, the real help happens. What's the solution? The goal is to get to resiliency and then to flow. If you're on top of this square, you're not going to fall down this hole. This is the real help. If you really want to help somebody, get them up here to flow. What is that? It's your uniqueness toggling your brain back and forth. The Harvard Business Review said the only healthy thought process was toggling like this between this 10 and 80. That's flow. They said too much focus, when we cause people to focus too much and for too long, it causes the focus circuits to blow in the brain. They lose energy, and then they lose self-control, which Jonathan called being in a hole. Flow leads to happiness because every time you are happy, you flowed. So now let's be clear what we mean by happiness. When students go on their cell phone, they are at 160. It's addictive behavior. They're down here, they're distracted. That's not happiness. And I told this to a high school class last week. So this is fresh in my mind. I told these high schoolers, I said, you know what? If being on your phone for 10 minutes caused you to have energy to the point you smiled, you focused, you were polite to others, and you even had a spring in your step, every teacher would begin every class by having you be on your phone for 10 minutes. That would be happiness. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about truly having excess energy up here, not just getting through the moment, sneaking away in the cell phone. The first 5 lessons of Instant Impact focus on resiliency, and every company covers the same topics: communication, uniqueness, trigger and trauma, habitual behavior, self-control. The real help happens after resiliency. No one is offering what we have with lessons 6, 7, and 8, how to flow. And here's the most important point of this entire talk. You can't master resiliency until you learn information beyond it or outside of it. Then your brain solidifies it. If this is only the level you learn, your brain solidifies everything below it. Part of the reason we teach our lesson 6 is it causes people to retain this resiliency. The focus of our lesson 6 is what we call the backward step. The reason people don't stay out of the hole is they use effort to get out of the hole, and then they think they need to use more effort to stay out of the hole. We call that a forward step. Anytime you're immediately going forward in effort and accomplishing the thing or getting a result in one step, it's a forward step. Actually, in order to stay out of the hole, they need to do the opposite of what got them out of the hole by taking what we call a backward step. Going this way and flowing is a backward step. So I want to give you an example of a backward step. And I get this question a lot because I help marriages stuff too. How would you help a guy grow in attraction to his wife? He is attracted to his wife, but he wants to become more attracted to his wife. How would you help him do that? Now, most people go the conscious brain route. Tell yourself, she's the most attractive woman in the world. Affirmations, right? Say it out loud. I think she's the most attractive person in the world. And then the minute he looks at another woman, the unconscious goes, well, then why are you doing that? And you're in a hole. Be careful about what you're saying because your unconscious hears everything. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. I wouldn't be anywhere without her. That's all conscious brain, and your attraction and your energy's in your unconscious brain. What we tell these guys is your unconscious doesn't know what you're thinking until you say it out loud or write it down. That's why it responds so quickly when you talk. If you share something with her that you've never shared before, your unconscious wants to know what you're thinking. That's why it makes you steal on so easy, and that's why you end up in a hole a lot of times. If you share that with her, your unconscious wants to hear more of that. It thinks the reason it learned it was because you shared with her, so it will try to push you towards her more. It will juice you or energize you towards her more, and you will feel more attracted. Notice that's a huge backward step. You're trying to feel more attracted, but you're not doing anything that you think does that. You're doing something, and then your unconscious reflectively takes care of it. We are trying to get our unconscious, I like to say, to our back. If 90% of our brain is to our back and it's like wind, pushing us forward, it is easy breezy. When we say all this stuff and we effort forward, our unconscious brain goes, buddy, and it fights us. And if you want to, with 10% of your brain, fight 90% of your brain, I think we all know how that's eventually going to end. You might win in the short term, but we like to say the capuchin monkey always wins. You're not going to get ahead of it. So what we do in this lesson 6 for this backward step is this thing we call a personal vision statement. And I'm sure people have heard of personal vision statements. I will tell you this is the opposite. I know people who have done personal vision statements for 35 years. They look at ours and they go, yours is wrong. This is exactly the wrong. This is the opposite way. And I go, yeah, because everybody else's personal vision statement is trying to reach the conscious brain. Our personal vision statement is trying to reach the unconscious brain. It's going to look backwards. That's why I coach people through it. It takes coaching to get through it because everybody, even if we give them instruction, they want to go consciously. So that's the goal, is if you can figure that out. And that personal vision statement is your uniqueness, like I say, down to a street address. Jonathan talked about intangible drivers. That's like a city and state. If you're a compassion server, Jonathan's compassion server, you both live in St. Louis, Missouri, but you clearly aren't the same person. Your street address would define where you really live. The personal vision statement defines your street address. If you always take before you handle anything, if you take a backward step into your uniqueness, then you're going to respond. It'll always be right, and you will always have more energy. So the question everybody's obviously wanting to know is, how did we help these people do this? So what happens is, if you think about Jonathan's list, these are, knowing your uniqueness. This is his top 10 list. Knowing your uniqueness. When you do this with a personal vision statement, this is going to keep you out of the hole. Avoiding statements and judgments. Bullies. Backward steps with bullies. Bullies do the opposite of the communication guidelines. Bullies make statements on you. They don't ask you any questions. They don't answer any questions. If you respond to them with the communication guidelines and take a backward step and understand them. I love teaching kids how to do this, but honestly, in the corporate world that I work in, there is more bullying going on in the corporate world at the higher levels than there is in middle school. And I love teaching executives how to deal with the bullying at work. And the way to do it is, when a bully bullies you, if you ask him questions and try to understand them, it dissolves it right away. Because now you're turning the bully's unconscious on them. And we talked about self-talk. Now we can be more specific. Is your self-talk in line with your uniqueness? If you talk differently than your uniqueness, your unconscious knows your uniqueness, your unconscious is going to knock you back. Your unconscious is going to go, no, 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 that's not you. Is your self-talk in line with that? So this is the exercise portion of this talk. So I'm going to ask this question is, what do you need to have or do to be happy? I want you to write down 3 things. And what I want you to do is imagine someone gives you a magic wand and it's going to be gone. It's going to disappear in 20 seconds. What are 3 things you'd wish for using that magic wand to make you happy? You get to have 3 things to make you happy. I'm going to take 20 seconds. You write it down. You don't have to share this with anybody. You can tear it up after you write it down. But just, what are 3 things you need to have or do to be happy? 20 seconds starting now. Okay, now remember, the purpose of your conscious brain, we call it the executive function. You're using it to guide your unconscious. Your conscious brain is made up of definitions. You cannot physiologically think without having a definition for each word you use. Whether you know it or not is a different case. And not knowing your own definitions for the words you use makes you controllable. There's 2 things that help your conscious brain become better, your steering wheel become better. 1 is the communication guidelines, and 2 is to know your definitions for the words you are using. I like to say mental health begins in definitions. So we're talking about happiness. What is happiness? Happiness is pleasure chemicals released by the brain in response to our surroundings, our circumstances, or like we like to say, our context. In fact, there is an equation for happiness. It's 4 E's: experiencing an effect exceeding an expectation. Every time you experience an effect that exceeds your expectation, your brain releases pleasure chemicals. Notice there are 2 halves of this definition. 1 half is covering the context, and the other half are expectations or our brain or thought process. For example, if I gave you $40 and you expected 20, your brain would release pleasure chemicals. If I gave you $40 and you expected 80, your brain would not release pleasure chemicals. Notice I gave you $40 in both cases and the results are different. So the context alone is not going to make us happy. If that's so, then why do people think making more money, bossing more people around and being more famous is going to make him happy? I love talking to students and asking this question, and they just stare at me blankly. Like, why do you think being the richest person in the world is going to make you happy? Why do people focus so much on controlling their context? How much control do you have over your context? Not very much. Sounds like a recipe for disaster. Expectations are all about where you put your brain before your encounter. That's the backward step. Notice, yeah, we deal in the context, but if your first step is to go here backwards, then deal with it, that's everything. That's the Alan Watts quote. The example I like to use for kids is riding a bicycle. You know, if there's a kid who wants to ride a bicycle and some other kid's riding it, he's got to wait till they're done. I like to tell them, act like you don't want to ride it. Because if the person who's riding it rides aimlessly, they'll get bored and tired very quickly. If they know you want to ride it, then they're going to ride it with a purpose. The purpose is not let you ride it. And they're going to ride it longer than if they were to get bored and ride aimlessly. However, if the person rides the bicycle while imagining they're in the Tour de France or a fighter pilot or a member of a posse riding a horse, they can ride that bike all day without getting tired. Why is that? It's about the thought process. How much control do you have over your unique brain? Why don't people focus on putting their brain in the right spot prior to stepping into circumstances? Why does everybody give this advice to everyone else? Focus on what's in your control. Teachers and psychologists give this advice to their students and patients all the time. We all know this. Why don't we do it? Controlling your thought process covers this fourth and fifth point from Jonathan. Your way of getting to one thought is unique to you. Do you know what it is? Your way of rehearsing away your triggers is unique to you. Your experience is different. Your triggers are different than other people's. Do you know yours? I have a heart for teachers because there is no reason why teachers shouldn't finish the school year with more energy than they began the year if this is what they like doing. Does anybody end with less energy doing what they like to do? If you're teaching, you like teaching, why are you ending with less energy? 5 years ago, Jonathan and I worked in another school district. We helped teachers have so much energy, they didn't want the school year to end. They didn't even want summer to come. One of the teachers didn't even want to go on spring break. And we taped that testimonial as well as the other testimonials. We showed it to the rest of the teachers in that school district, and those teachers still didn't believe it. I share that story in corporate settings to say that they aren't in the most dysfunctional culture. What we like to do is we like to simplify all this and make it a game. And the psychologist, when she got to this stage in Instant Impact, recognized this as psychological Halloweenism. Psychologists know what I'm about to show you, but they have no idea how to do it. And this is what shocked her. She's like, John, you actually can explain how to intentionally do this. The personal vision statement identifies 3 contexts for each individual: your worst or draining, your normal, and your ideal, where you're able to help other people. We name the thought process gears you need to be in, because there's really only 3. We name them superhero, alter ego, and sidekick. When the context is not draining, you need to be in your alter ego and you will gain energy. When someone else needs help, you need to be in your superhero. If when you are in your worst or draining context, you need to be in your sidekick and you won't lose energy. So notice, if you do this, there's no way to ever lose any energy. That's how you gain. The only reason people lose energy is they are in the wrong gear for the given context. I see this with students all the time. You will see it when you learn this, you will see it clear as day. The draining context happens. The kid is just walking around being himself. And what happens? Boom. It's a bad day. They throw a fit when something happens that drains them. The person tries to help somebody that doesn't need help, and they lose some energy. Worse, they hit their draining context and they go, I'm going to be my superhero. I am going to just put my foot down and deal with this thing, and they lose all their energy. I like to say they lose it, meaning lose it all. They lose all their energy. Studies have shown that people who have the best mental health practice psychological Halloweenism. So we're talking about these contexts, right? Well, Jonathan covered 2 of his top 10 that identify your context, if you think about it. The 5 people you hang around with the most are affecting your context. Who do you have to be when you are around each of these 5 people? Is there somebody you're around a lot that you have to be in your sidekick? Help your influencers. What if the person you're around the most is destructive? Some teachers have a student, because you spend all day with a student and they're really destructive, and you spend all day dealing with them. What are they doing to your thought process? We shared this in Instant Impact, and now hopefully you can see why this is so important. We have a case study. There was a student who had 88 seclusions and restraints the first 3 months of school in a different school district other than Kaukauna. 88. Average more than 1 a day. Now think about that teacher. Essentially every day the teacher's dealing with this stressful situation. And they had all the training that everybody else gets. They moved the kid to a teacher that had our training, and the next 6 months the kid had 0, Z-E-R-O, seclusions and restraints. How do you think that teacher got through their day? We have another case, middle school, self-contained EBD classroom in another school district. They had 69 seclusions and restraints. They took the training. They had 14 the next year. The year after that, they had 0. The year after that, they had 0. All of our testimonials, not just the ones we shared, involved people growing in self-esteem. So what's the definition of self-esteem? Self-esteem is confidence in your uniqueness. So let's look at the 4 levels of self-esteem. No self-esteem. These people are happy when others are experiencing trauma, when others are experiencing tension. Why? Because they don't know their uniqueness. All they can do is delight in the misfortune of others. When they take the quiz, the magic wand quiz, their answer is they want something bad. What would make them happy if something bad happened to somebody else? I wish my enemy would die or get injured. I wish my competition would go bankrupt. That's the answer to their question. Low self-esteem. These people are happy when anyone affirms them. Think of peer pressure. This is peer pressure. Why? Because they're looking for confidence to replace uniqueness. When people answer the magic wand and say they want situations where they avoid tension, you know what would make me happy? I win the lottery. You know what would make me happy? I sit on a drink under a cabana drinking Mai Tais for the rest of my life. Retirement. That's the strategy that they have. Mid self-esteem. They're happy when they're affirmed by a role model, their teacher, their parent, or coach. These people know their uniqueness, but they're not completely confident in it. Now notice, this is a finish line. If LeBron James tells me I'm a good basketball player, why do I have to get any better at basketball? I'm not going to hear a better affirmation than that. I get it. Mid self-esteem is better than the low self-esteem of peer pressure people. It's great. But if we think getting our kids to mid self-esteem is the goal, once they get there, they're done. You can't motivate them anymore past that. They've achieved their goal. People who answer the magic wand by saying that they want to do something that looks for tension. Basically, they want to win an award. I'd be happy if I won an award, if I got a promotion, if I earned a degree, if I took on some sort of challenge. Their brain is wired here. The people who were happy, they achieved high self-esteem. And I usually have to explain this twice, what high self-esteem is. They don't feel better about themselves when they're affirmed. They feel better about the other person. And what I mean by that is if you affirm me, why is that? It says completely confident in your uniqueness. If I'm completely confident in my uniqueness in one area, and you affirm me in that area, it isn't going to make me feel any better about me because I know I'm confident I'm good at that. However, I'm going to actually look up to you. I'm going to think better of you, not because you affirm me, but because you recognized my uniqueness, my confidence, my self-esteem. I'm actually going to look up to you. I'm going to actually think better about you. This is what happiness is. You want to respond to everything. People who fill out the people who answer the magic wand, that they want to be put in the context where they can respond to everything by being more themselves. That's the key. If I can bring out more of my self in response to everything, that's how I want to be happy. Now look at Jonathan's 7, 8, and 9. We talked about help your influencers. Well, you cannot give something that you don't have. You can try to help people, but if you don't have resiliency, you can't give people resiliency. If you don't have happiness, you can't give people happiness. If you don't have high self-esteem, you can't give it to others. We want to help the teachers have those things so they're able to give it. Okay? I talk to psychologists, coaches, and teachers, and I ask psychologists, do you get therapy? I mean, you give therapy, right? Coaches, do you have a coach? I mean, what you're doing is valuable, right? Teachers, are you being taught by somebody? Are you taking a class? I will tell you the psychologist did get therapy, which helped her, not really sink in the hole, because the worst thing a psychologist could do is be in a hole and then avoid therapy. That'll ruin them. However, all the therapy did was get her out of her hole so she could fall back into it, which is why she called me. Now notice, helping your influencers is proof you're moving from no to low. People who are no self-esteem aren't going to help anybody. They're going to wish other people's ruin. So helping your influencers, Jonathan gave you, was actually the measure from no to low. Admitting you're wrong. That takes confidence. Like Jonathan said, why do we think better of people who admit when they're wrong, but we think everybody's going to think poorly of us when we're wrong? When you understand and have enough confidence in who you are to realize I can be wrong about stuff, it has nothing to do with who I am. That's when you start moving to mid self-esteem. Admitting you're wrong is that move from low to mid self-esteem. It's showing, when I see someone admit they're wrong, I go, that person is at mid self-esteem. They know who they are, and they know their actions have nothing to do with who they are as a person. High self-esteem, affirming others. When you're affirming others, when I'm actually thinking well of others who affirm me, but you're actively looking to affirm others, you're actively looking for, I want a context where I can go help other people. I have something to give. Now you've moved to high self-esteem. That's the affirming others is that mid to high. So this was our happiness slide. Notice, control and perfection prevent healthy happiness. Why? Experiencing an effect is giving up control. We're giving up control. We're responding. When you take control, it's no longer effect, it's a cause. Taking control blocks this half of happiness. What about perfection? Perfection is an expectation that can't be exceeded. Perfection blocks this half of happiness. Joy, we said happiness is getting pleasure chemicals in response to your context. Joy is pleasure chemicals released by the brain regardless of your context. Some call this being generally or genuinely happy. What's the difference? Well, we saw affirming others leads to happiness in the long term, and it's because of the unconscious brain. And Jonathan shared it here with love. He talked about love is given without expecting anything in return. When you give to someone without expecting anything in return, your unconscious brain gives you pleasure chemicals regardless of your context. Loving others results in joy. But what is your definition of love? When people say unconditional love, giving to somebody without expecting anything in return is unconditional. When someone says unconditional love, their unconscious goes, then what's conditional love? And the unconscious just starts wearing them out until it gets that answer. We are taking ourselves in a hole of our unconscious brain, trying to get forward and look right and be right. And that's the issue. So the question on everybody's mind should be, John, how did you help these people never fall back in the hole again? We pointed them to their uniqueness. Each person has a mountain, a unique mountain. If the person, once you get out of the hole, if you grow in confidence in who you are, you will progress up this mountain and you won't be walking around on the flat ground waiting to fall into another hole. That is what the psychologist realized. She's like, that is the key. I can meet with you and talk about how close I'm getting to my uniqueness, and you can meet with me and tell me how close you're getting to your uniqueness, and we can bond over that, and we can still do that. The goal is, are you growing in confidence in your uniqueness?
So I want to end with some questions here. Do you know how to give your energy to someone who knows how to receive it? Is the same person able to give you their energy without you taking it? Emotional intelligence is understanding the uniqueness of others and treating them the way they want to be treated. So another question, do you know how you want to be treated well enough you can explain it to others? We say that there are three steps to this. Understand our uniqueness, own our uniqueness, and then share it. For example, your superintendent is an exhorter. What that means is he wants you to feel what he's feeling. So when he shares with you, one of the easiest things that you can do is mirror his emotions, beginning with your face. We taught that to a room full of educators, and he walked into the room. One of the attendees decided to see if we were right, so they did it, and he didn't want to leave the room, and everyone laughed. It only takes about 20 minutes a week to be happy. We gave a group of educators 7 months to watch only 3 hours of videos, and half didn't do it. I realized they were overwhelmed, anxious, frustrated, unsettled. But this was the one thing that could have helped them with everything else in their life. I realized it was a backward step. However, I feel bad because they could have sharpened their saw, and we know that analogy, instead of wearing themselves out by using a dull saw. So our final point, we're halfway through the pandemic. What is your plan for happiness in 2021? Thank you so much.